I want you to put evidence to support our ideas.
CUNY START is for students who have applied to one of the campuses and they've been accepted, but they did not pass their placement test.
He's saying that.
What we found is that students who spend many semesters in remedial courses are less likely to graduate. CUNY START was a way to kind of bundle all of their remedial needs in one semester and get this intensive practice.
What is 3 times 6? 18.
Students take reading, writing, and math, and they're with us Monday through Friday, all day long. Students do not have to pay the regular tuition. They just have to pay $75. That's the sort of one-time program fee for the whole course.
Is that a fact or an interpretation? Fact. That's a fact.
In our curriculum, we privilege sort of depth over breadth. So there's lots and lots of time for students to acquire a few kinds of skills that are of very high utility.
See what I did to figure that out? What did I do?
The language and thinking unit is the first 4 weeks of the semester.
In the story, Alvarez has to overcome several obstacles, including immigration and her family's expectations for her.
The authors include people such as Julia Alvarez, Malcolm X, Richard Wright, Sherman Alexie. So they come from a variety of different time periods and sort of different backgrounds.
You can use it both ways.
We want them to make personal connections to these writers' lives, and they're also responding in academic ways to the text.
It's what the author's trying to tell us.
They're looking at quotes, they're learning how to sort of paraphrase a quote, they're learning how to summarize sort of a larger text.
I feel like our definition of plot and interpretation is getting better as we go along.
And then they really build awareness of their own sort of struggles with reading and writing, what they are doing successfully, and what strategies can they borrow from other people who are successful.
Right over. It's confusion. I'll write over.
You don't want me to read it?
We shift from looking at memoir as sort of our primary text to looking at short stories.
Do you see evidence in that paragraph for the idea that the boy came of age?
And all of the short stories are around this theme of coming of age.
When the boy was running, he didn't want to face the situation. So when you are coming of age, if you have a problem, you gotta fix it.
It's sort of in keeping in line with this idea of everyone's making this transition to becoming a college student.
That coming of age doesn't have an age. You could come of age when you're 5. You could come of age when you're 6. Coming of age doesn't mean that you're gonna get older in 2-3 point seconds.
Now we want them to do more analysis, so interpret literature.
He's an indolent man, which is lazy. And then when he asked him what was an indolent man, the grandfather didn't really give a straightforward answer.
Is Masood religious?
And then also, how can they find evidence for their interpretations?
There's 2 language categories, right? 5 is also language. What's the difference between these 2?
A third component to our curriculum is the practice for the CUNY assessment test in writing.
What did you think? Did he have run-ons, fragments?
That's the exam that all of them need to retake.
It's like sort of goes with a connection sentence.
That entails looking at a lot of model essays, and then they kind of analyze these models.
Spend like 5 minutes and try to write down your own thesis statement.
They also do so much in-class writing. They get feedback from their teachers, they get feedback from their peers.
This is good because you're looking very closely at the words of the quote.
It's very intensive.
That's how they will use to see them.
At that point of the semester, they are able to retake their exams, and some of them pass, and some of them will need a little bit of extra preparation. And for those students, they have the opportunity to take an additional practice unit of about 4 to 6 weeks where they can really zero in on the skills that they're needing to address.
We're talking about the difference between plot and interpretation.
In reading and writing classes, the model that we use is based on this idea of cognitive apprenticeship. Expertise is taught through a process of modeling, providing lots and lots of practice, and while students are practicing, providing lots and lots of coaching and scaffolding. And then over time, as expertise develops, gradually releasing responsibility to students.
Does it ever say how old she is? No.
In CUNY START, the teachers model for the students in lots of different ways and show them the processes that we as experienced readers and writers do, and they often happen invisibly.
Her teeth, it says that her teeth are worn down and
So to
very
you, that's evidence that she's
older.
Okay, I want some more evidence looking at quotes from the story about how old she is.
And that's why it's so hard to teach, is you have to become aware of all of those different steps, and you also have to help students become aware of all of those different steps.
Her skin was weathered and almost black, soft and creased like the leather on the seats of antique.
Metacognition is all about being aware of your invisible processes as you have them.
When it's like when it's worn out,
Worn out.
you know, very old.
And so when we model, we use think-alouds where we talk about what's going on in our heads.
What are the things that she's compared to? An antique car,
Leather seat.
leather seat.
This is a very important part of our approach.
I don't think we came to 100% agreement. Some people think she's a little older, some people think she's a little younger. We all have evidence for that, so I guess we can just leave that as is because we don't have to agree.
Making these skills accessible through taking away the mystery, naming the skills, talking about when and why we use them.
We're going to talk about quote sandwiches. What do you think that the meat is in the sandwich when we're writing?
We provide them with, I guess I call them smart tools, different kinds of templates that we use
And I'm going to show you a few examples.
that contain some of the information about how to structure an essay, or contain some of the information for how to make a complex argument, but not all of the information.
You're going to do most of your explaining in the bottom slice. Right now you're just setting yourself up. I think that giving them the tools and kind of like demystifying a lot of stuff is really important too. And sometimes that means we're telling you, okay, every time you write something, you're going to refer back to this in some form or another. I really think that's true for college writing. You have to introduce your quote, you have to have your quote, and you have to interpret it. And if no one ever tells you that that's what you do with a quote, then you might not ever know.
I don't get it. Why they come one by one to see the mouth of the Eskimo?
You remember at the beginning of the story, she asked them to read about the Eskimos. It tells them how women would chew on the hides of the animal.
So students are getting scaffolded through using these smart tools and then being able to try them out in a small group environment that's not threatening.
I think we did a discussion on it.
Listening to each other and building on what each other is saying is something we're also working on.
That's what his grandfather was doing, scheming. And that's where he was like, that's where it was wrong at.
Hearing how other students are responding to text or are processing text or are talking about the kind of protocols that we teach them. And so they have opportunities to learn from sort of a range of models.
What other evidence do you have? A stronger one. I'm looking for a strong evidence.
Fading is when you slowly release responsibility to the learner, but also knowing the precise moments that you can intervene to coach students in a way that doesn't overwhelm them or take away their agency.
As far as that characteristic, the grandfather was wrong.
And make the decision about what do I give feedback on, where is that coaching moment that's going to be helpful to the student.
It's fine. There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of myself.
You're letting the students make mistakes, and you have to let yourself watch it happen.
And when he said you're still 50 pounds, and that to me, it's like his suffering hasn't ended.
I think a lot of our students have equated mistakes with failure and judgment. And so we really want to sort of unattach those two things. Making a mistake means that you're trying and that you're exploring and that you're going into new territory.
Just call out if you have some quality for the grandfather that you think should be on the list.
That's really important because expert readers make mistakes, but they have strategies for moving through them.
The grandfather was so religious, then he wouldn't be trying to manipulate Masood.
We're teaching students to develop skill in becoming strong academic readers and writers.
And then I think it kind of is true because then you got the little boy who said he always dreamed that one day that just might belong to his grandfather.
When you read a complex text, you have to understand that comprehension is something that emerges over time.
I think in this part he's saying like, before Allah or God calls me to his presence, that's what I want to do.
And so in these classes, we're putting students in situations where they're learning how to feel comfortable with complexity and how to sort of untangle the difficulty over time.
Against Marcos.
Isn't there like a specific word for that?
So if you inherit something, that means that you're spoiled?
Our teacher training program really mirrors the way that we teach our students. Every teacher in CUNY Start, no matter what level of experience they have, they start out as an apprentice teacher in the classroom of a master teacher.
I still think grounding our ideas in what's in the text here about how she feels is important.
We try to help them name the processes of being a good teacher. So for example, we have transcripts of master teachers teaching, and we have new teachers identify the different parts of what they're doing.
I feel like I could have done that more.
Every apprentice teacher meets with their master teacher at least once, sometimes twice a week. Often they'll reflect about what they've seen in their observations and how it fits in with our core values and practices. And slowly, the apprentice teacher goes from really being an observer and working with small groups of students to taking on more and more responsibility.
You have to say more with less if you're only doing 3 paragraphs.
By week 12, the roles have mostly flipped, and the apprentice teacher is taking primary responsibility for leading the class and planning the lessons, but with copious support and coaching and feedback from the master teachers.
Those are two different ideas.
As they're learning and practicing the small pieces, they're also getting to see the big picture and the transformation that happens with the students.
How many times do you read it over?
An apprenticeship approach gives them time to see the change that's enacted in students over time. And this is so powerful a way to train teachers.
To either agree or disagree with their interpretation of the ending. I've been to a lot of teacher trainings, and being able to be in a class as an apprentice with a master teacher has been the most transformative training event of my teaching career.
Okay, but in college, you have different age, I have different age, she has different age.
So often, teachers aren't trained to pay attention to what the students are implicitly telling them with their work, because we're trained that we have to cover a syllabus or that we have to evaluate students, when really what we need to do, especially in developmental education, is teach them.
So how about
In CUNY Start, what we're really about is meeting students where they are and helping them get to a completely different place.
he has a disciplined personality? Yeah.
They do pass their tests at high rates at the end of the classes, but it's not just about passing a test, it's about becoming a reader and a writer and a student who can be successful and self-aware.
I think you should do 3 paragraphs. 3? Yeah.
In this class, they're not speeded through. There's a leisure to it that allows them to try something out once. They're not going to get judged for it. They're going to try it out again the next week. At a certain point, they're going to get something.
Maybe this was a little bit too.
Yeah.
It takes time to develop that insight. We don't want to tell them that. We want them to internalize it. We want them to experience the joy of that. And I think that you can't do it another way.